Now it's deer season, and for us over here in southeast Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin, and Dylan and I are actually going out on our first hunt this year.
Can't wait. Get these videos done. Let's go.
And that's the funny thing. We did a woeful amount yesterday. How many did we do the day before? Because we didn't see each other for almost 3 weeks. So
9 or 10 in one day.
yeah, it was something like that. And we just cooked them out. And yesterday we had hours. And I think we had a couple beers. We ended up shooting our bows like at light. We went and picked up a buck from the taxidermist and one from last year in Minnesota.
It was a productive day, just not from getting videos shot.
Yeah, it's like I want to go out in the woods. So it's just kind of like, get these videos done. I'll get on point. Sorry. Okay, it's season, and everyone has their favorite deer call. Everyone's taking deer calls out to the woods, and we've even seen it. Mike that used to work with Dylan, he was filming with me in Reedstown down in Wisconsin, and the neighbor all of a sudden let loose with a sequence of rattling and grunt calls and snort wheezes that had every deer running towards us. And they were about a quarter mile away. All these deer ran into us. They sat on a food plot nearby and just kept looking back, stomping their feet. I can guarantee the neighbor didn't even know those deer were there. But he spooked deer for a long, long ways away, and I want to keep you from doing that. So let's go through this list, and you can see we have 3 right here from worst at number 3 to best at number 5. And then we have 2-1 down here, and that's Jeff and Dylan debate time. So we're going to get at it, throw down, and now I think we actually agree on these. It's funny, we do agree on the last 2.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we might even agree on 1 too, but either way, it doesn't matter. They're so close. So we'll have a runner-up, and then we'll have the worst first, category down there at the end. So stay tuned for that. Bleat can. Bleat cans are, to me, the least invasive. They're very low impact. They're natural. I don't think any deer runs from a bleat. It's not an alarming sound. And we were talking about that, and even in inventions, whoever invented the bleat can, that was pretty darn cool that they came up with this and that can call. I like this call. I think it doesn't have a lot of power behind it, but at the right time with the right buck, really seeking a doe during the hot time. Maybe, can you imagine a buck that's already bred a doe and he's really fired up? 4 or 5 days later, he's looking for his next conquest, and he hears this little bleat off in the brush, and he doesn't have any other ones around. I mean, he's probably coming right over. But bottom line is, very low impact. I would think unless you just keep blowing it, kind of like our neighbor did with every grunt call in the book and bag, whatever he brought out, you're not going to spook them. If you're just taking a couple here and there, you could probably turn that can over 3 times every 20 minutes, and you're not going to spook anything other than if they just see you getting it in and out of your backpack or your pocket or moving around. That might spook something more, probably does have the potential to spook something more than actually using it itself. Grunt calls, I carry a grunt call. I feel has a little bit more power than a bleat overall. In the right circumstance, either one can be better than the other. But a grunt call is very low impact too. I believe it has a little bit more power. So I like carrying it all the time. I think it can work all season long. And it's really for that buck that's curious or that buck that's actively seeking for does. And maybe he's curious tonight when we go out. Maybe we see a big buck just 50 yards out. He's not coming towards us, and we grunt and just get him to come over us because he's curious. What other buck is over there? It sounds like an older buck. I want to go check it out. And so we have those grunt calls. In fact, this is the one I use. A lot of people ask me. These are from the old True Talker grunt calls, and they're rubberized. There's rubber coating, so it sounds very realistic to me. It has that lower, more guttural sound. I like that, so it piques that interest. But unless you're blowing it and you're, that was Mary had a little lamb, by the way. But anyways, if you're blowing it a lot,
cross buns.
yeah, I could do jingle bells. But anyways, this is very low impact unless you're just being overly aggressive with it, and I really like carrying this. So these first 2 right here, spooking deer, I don't even really worry about them unless you're overusing them and just blind calling too much over and over again, and allowing a deer to pick you up before you see him. And that's the thing when it comes to a mature buck and an older buck. First, I want to thank you guys so much for buying and trying our food plot seed blends. Now, I want to introduce to you our switchgrass blends. And I say blend because we have a southern variety and a northern variety specific to your region. We have a base seed that goes into that's specific to you. And then we have a couple of moderately height stiffening varieties within there so that we can make sure that your stand of switchgrass stays up longer. Check them out on our website. Thank you guys so much. We've sold seed now in over 40 states, and we really appreciate you trying us out. Check out our switchgrass on our site, www.whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. Before you see them, and that's the thing when it comes to a mature buck and an older buck, you blow on this call or you turn this can, and he's 70 yards behind you, and he didn't see you move, but he heard you and he picked you out in that stand. He knows something's that way. Then he's looking. He's coming in. What's in front of me? He's looking for an animal, and all of a sudden you go and put it in your pocket. Just this little movement, and you're done. Let alone if you're sitting up, standing up, moving around, he'll pick you out quick, and you didn't even know he was there. Number 3, snort, wheeze, growl. This is where it gets into more of an aggressive phase. These two are non-aggressive. Snort, wheezes, and growls are aggressive. This is where I've seen snort, wheeze buck go the other way. A mature buck. I shot him. Nice 174-inch 5-year-old that we were after in Wisconsin, and with a bow. 2 bucks fighting out in the field. He's going the opposite direction. They're snort, wheezing at each other. On the other hand, I've actually had a buck that's very aggressive, just blow into my hand, and him come in, raking the ground, breaking brush, coming all the way to me, and it was too dark by the time he came in. And the next morning, about maybe between a quarter and a half mile, 600 yards away, I was in another area, and that buck that I was sure it was him, just walking through in the morning, an hour before light, he charged me. Only deer I've ever had charge me, that was in 2004, and he literally got from me to Dylan, which is like 6-7 feet. And I was fumbling for a flashlight, an arrow, everything. I thought he was going to run over me. I think he was being aggressive. It actually got my heart going pretty much, you can imagine. And just like that, he was gone. And I shot him about 2 hours later. I've seen him come towards snort wheezing, go away. And a lot of these older bucks, especially in high hunting pressure states, that's the thing too. A lot of these calls work better in some of these low pressure, more fantasy land states because they're not used to being called to. If they're not used to being called to, they don't become shy to calls. But there are a lot of bucks that grow to an older age because they're not aggressive. They don't come into very aggressive calls like a growl or a snort wheeze. Some will. And if you're in some of those fantasy land states using one of those calls, see a big buck 400 yards across the field, use a snort wheeze, he might come right over to you. But there's just as many bucks that get to an older age, especially those super secretive bucks, that those ghosts, they go the other way. And they hear that aggressiveness. They just don't want to fight. And they have their personalities. Not every buck is the same. John Azoga, I remember, he's a famous deer research biologist located up in UP in Michigan. He has, I believe, still the most peer-reviewed articles out of anybody in the country ever, or was a part of the most peer-reviewed articles written. And he told me about a favorite buck in Camp Cousineau Deer Research Facility. It's a mile enclosure up in the UP in Michigan. They studied deer for decades. And it was a really cool buck where there was an aggressive buck. There were a lot of buck deaths in the enclosure, wounds. And that was the number 1 buck. And that buck, because he was aggressive, got killed. Probably killed at a younger age, 5 years old, 6 years old, whatever it was. Well, here he had this older stud that was ranked number 12th or 14th or 10th on the pecking order of bucks in that enclosure. He rose to the top. And he did it all with bluffing and all with feigning and making deer think that he was their bucks. He was going to fight. He's very aggressive posturing. He never fought. No more deaths inside the enclosure due to fighting. And once that bully was out of there, then he rose straight to the top. And I think that's really interesting. It just speaks to their personalities. Always think about those buck personalities when you're calling. And if you're using an aggressive call on a shy buck, you're going to be... In fact, if you use an aggressive call on a shy buck, he's probably not coming back around that area for a while, too. That gets imprinted in his brain. So he gets down to number 2. Number 1. Dylan, both of them.
I'm popping in.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll talk about both. One is rattling antlers and one is a decoy. And so we, right away, I think rattling antlers. And then right off the bat, I asked Dylan, what do you think is number 1? Before we even ever made a list or anything. And you said rattling antlers right off the bat. Yeah. And I said, what about a decoy? And Dylan's like, whoa, kind of like, what's your thought with these?
Deer call implies sound. Right?
Yeah.
So, okay, but I think they go in combination.
Artificial attractant.
Yeah. No, I'll allow it. But I just think it's so situational.
I do too.
And I feel like when you pull out either a decoy or rattling, or maybe even a snorweeds, I feel like you're pulling out like the last tools available in your bucket and just like throwing a Hail Mary, or just really going for broke, right? Like,
well, we talked about though, like with decoys, that decoy is some hunters, that's their main trick in the book. And
which I think is cool. But, a lot of those are Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas.
Open areas.
Yes.
Non-wooded areas.
Yep.
Low hunter density areas. Low hunting pressure, more towards fantasy land type area.
And, I've heard of guys here in Wisconsin, western side of Wisconsin, that have great luck with decoys. I just haven't personally had it happen. I've had one deer come in Wisconsin to a decoy that reacted positively to it. Most of the time, it's a doe that sees it from 80 yards away, 100 yards away, and starts stomping. She circles downwind, doesn't get the right scent, and she's gone.
And that was my experience with it. That friend puts decoy out, deer come out of the woods, see decoy, and run. And so that hunt was ruined. And it's a little bit different where we're hunting too, because there's people that hunt 160-acre cornfield. And there's a giant buck coming back in the corner every single evening or afternoon.
In that situation, I feel like that's a very effective way to do it.
Well, and you can just slip down, and it's rutting time, so they might be coming out 3 hours before dark. They're just coming out to look around, and then you set this decoy. You can get into within 150 yards. You can see it very easily. You're not very low impact. You put a decoy out, it's right out in the open. That's a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're isolating yourself too when you use either rattling or a decoy, if it's a buck decoy, in that you are challenging, right? You're throwing that challenge out there, so you have to have an animal or a buck that has that demeanor that is, I'm bigger, I'm better, this is mine, I'm going to whoop ass.
And if he doesn't have that personality, you're in trouble.
Right, yeah, exactly. So you're scaring away so many more of those deer that maybe you'd want to shoot, depending on what area you're in. You're scaring away that 2-year-old, that 3-year-old that might be a target buck depending on where you're hunting. So
in those antlers, what I find is with a rattling antler that's so tough is when deer hear that, they're coming into a fight. The ones that don't want to come into a fight just don't come in. And even if they believe that it's a buck making these noises or two bucks fighting, but when one does come in, they come downwind of you. And so most of the areas we hunt, we have field edge area, but a lot of times we're hunting in the woods a ways.
Right.
And so a buck could get in some thick cover behind us. They typically wouldn't. That's why we're trying to push that envelope where you get in deep enough to experience the best, especially reclusive buck movement, older buck movement. But we're not so far in that they would get behind us typically. But that doesn't mean we don't have heavy cover or switchgrass or something behind us or corn where they could slip behind us. And that's the problem with, you need to have your downwind protected. And so once your downwind's protected, that's part of it. But then you have to be calling a buck that's actually going to come in and not run the other way. And that puts that buck into a special category too.
Absolutely.
He's very aggressive. And if he's older and very aggressive, he might have been shot a few years ago. And so around here, there's probably not a lot of overly aggressive 5-6-year-olds.
That's a very good point, right? So those aggressive bucks that maybe would have came in at 3-4 years old, are out of that pool once they're 6 years old. They're the more docile animal.
It'd be one thing
if
if
it that far.
rattling antlers just came out in 2020.
Yeah.
But they've been around for many decades. So the deer have wised up, and I believe they can be conditioned over time too, just as a herd.
I'll let you close this one out.
Okay. So wait. Did we pick a number one?
Okay.
I'm thinking. Let's see. Here, I'm gonna write the first letter over here, and no one can see that. I'm just gonna write the first letter over here. I'm gonna cover that up. Okay, here you go, Dylan.
All right.
You write the first letter, what you think it is, without seeing mine. Okay. Look at that. We both have an R.
Perfect.
Rattling antlers. So we would put decoy as the runner-up, and antlers.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, no, and really, again, we're trying to help you guys out because I don't want to see that situation where my neighbor, and to be honest, I think they were actually starting to guide on that property. We'd heard a diesel truck dropping someone off in the field, and so I believe that they dropped off a hunter. He was paying to hunt, and he just pulled out his bag of tricks, probably not to the outfitter's knowledge or guide's knowledge, and started using everything because he's in big buck area, and if he calls, one's going to come running in, right?
I've had to freelance video some people like that where you're out there and next thing you know they're pulling out the grunt call, they're pulling out the rattle bag, they're pulling, the can, and it's like, I'm just there to film the hunt, but at some point I want to just, poke and be like, hey, stop it.
Yeah, Dylan has to wonder, because if I pull mine out, there's usually a buck.
Yeah.
I'm just going something like playing a little tune. That was a good one, wasn't it? Or that's Jingle Bells.
All right.
So anyways, we just were trying to pass the time. Otherwise, if I use my grunt call, it's usually because there's a mature buck that I want to shoot that's over there, or I believe for some reason because there's or brush going back and forth that there's a buck over there I want to come closer. Bottom line is, going into the woods, we want you to be confident with what you're using. It's okay to use some of these. They each have their place, but really know their place, because in a lot of cases, especially with the snort wheezes, growls, decoys, antlers, they can do more harm than good in most situations. So keep that in mind when you're heading to the woods, and I think you'll be a better hunter this fall and beyond. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.